The Philadelphia Eagles are potentially heading down one of the darker paths within the NFL. And after an embarrassing loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, all the problems this team had have come to the forefront and now everyone knows their weaknesses. This is an Eagles team that is poorly coached and personnel-wise is not as good as many people thought they would be. So let's go ahead and break it all down. Let's start off with the actual game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because like I said, it was an absolute embarrassment from the Philadelphia Eagles. With a score of 32-9, the Eagles played one of their worst games the entire season, but yet again, all the problems that showed in this game have been following them for the past 7 to 8 weeks. Ever since that San Francisco and Dallas game, everybody knows how to beat this team. Yet despite the game plan of how to beat this team being showcased over and over again, the Philadelphia Eagles coaching staff and players themselves made zero adjustments to find ways to win. When teams are running cover zero and blitzing you on third down every single time, adjustments have to be made, yet they didn't make them. And it doesn't take an NFL genius to go out there and make the adjustments. It's not like it's a super complicated answer to figure out, because a good team with good coaches would make the adjustments necessary to beat a cover zero blitz the day that it started to happen. But even though there were solutions in sight, they were so persistent to change what they do and they just wanted to stick to the formula over and over again. Here's an idea, Nick Sirianni. Why not make the proper adjustments to find ways to actually win? Because I'm sorry, after I would have gotten blown out by Dallas and San Francisco, I would have been like, hey, let's make the proper adjustments to find ways to win. But the stubbornness of Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson to actually adjust was really a major reason why they struggled. Sure, was Jalen Hurts, the offensive line, and the receivers perfect? No, but at the end of the day, it's up to the coaching staff to find ways to get these guys back in the groove. I personally have a very hard time putting any of the blame on Jalen Hurts or this running game or this passing game because at the end of the day, they were not put in the proper position to succeed. When every single snap you have a free rusher right in your face and you have to go out there and make plays over and over again, it's going to get tiring and you're going to get beat down. Think of how many times Jalen Hurts dropped back and had a person right in his face and he had to scramble out and make a play on the run. It felt like it happened at least 25 times every single game. So you'd think that the team would go out there and make the proper adjustments to solve the problems, but as I've said over and over again, they didn't make it. Now that's just the coaching side of things. We'll talk about them a little bit more and whether or not I think they should get replaced a little bit later. Let's actually talk about the personnel. We'll start off with the offense because truth be told, there's not a whole lot of personnel problems on this offense. You take away DeAndre Swift, who even though he was a Pro Bowler this year, does not deserve that title at all. The offense as a whole is still very good. I know Jason Kelce is likely going to be retiring, but I guarantee you they're going to have a good fix for that problem. And as it is, Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Cam Jurgens, Landon Dickerson are good enough players to still have a top 10 unit. Yes, the offensive line will be worse next year because Jason Kelce isn't there, but that's kind of to be expected because Jason Kelce is an all-pro level player. But I'm not that concerned about the offense in terms of the actual personnel. However, a lot of my concerns stem on the personnel on the defensive side of things. Yes, these schemes did not give them any favors, but at the end of the day, the players couldn't make a tackle to save their life last night, and that's just the bare minimum of the issues they have. Let's get this out of the way. Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox are basically out the door after next season, and that's not due to their talent or their level of play, it's just more to do with their age. Because outside of Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, it's actually a pretty good unit with guys like Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, Milton Williams, and Nolan Smith. And if Jalen Carter can become that every single down just dominant threat to go along with Nolan Smith taking strides to becoming a very good pass rusher, that defensive line is still going to be very good. Granted, you're banking on them improving to become that all-pro level player, but I do think that a guy like Jalen Carter can definitely get there. Everything else in the defense has to be addressed, from the safeties to the corners to the linebacking core. It's all pretty bad. You take away Darius Slay, who at this stage of his career is also into his 30s and just got carted off the field last night, the unit as a whole is just very bad. James Bradbury, who just got a 3-year contract, is absolutely horrible, which isn't very shocking. I thought it was very obvious that he was the weaker link of the duo they had in corners. But then you look at their safeties, and yeah, Kevin Byard is a decent player, but I don't really think he fits their system all that well. And he's also on the wrong side of 30 at this point. Reed Blankenship is a good safety, but I wouldn't say he's anything special. And you take away Darius Slay and Kevin Byard, the rest of your guys are Achille Ringo, Avonte Maddox, Bradley Roby, Eli Ricks, Justin Evans, and Sidney Brown, and those guys suck. I think Achille Ringo has the talent to be a decent corner one day, but will he ever be that cornerback 1 or cornerback 2 type of guy? I don't know. I have my doubts. And outside of those guys, I mean, let's just be honest, it's not a very good unit. And when Darius Slay and James Bradbury retire or get moved on from, especially due to their age, it's going to be a very bad unit unless they look to address that this offseason. Next, the linebackers, which is arguably the worst part of this defense. For starters, they can't cover, they can't tackle, they can't hold a gap, they can't get off blocks. They're basically just what I would be if I was on the NFL field if I had their type of body. And yes, this is a problem this year, but I can almost guarantee you it's going to be even more of a problem next year because Zach Cunningham, Shaq Leonard, and Nicholas Morrow are all free agents, which might seem like a good thing until you actually look at what linebackers are potentially going to be available this offseason. For starters, the draft isn't really full of just outstanding linebackers. The best ones are guys from Clemson and Jeremiah Trotter and Adrian Cooper, but those are second and third round picks and they don't have the talent, in my opinion, right now to really play a substantial role on a big time team like Philadelphia. And sure, there are going to be some free agents out there like Devin White, but I can almost guarantee you that Philadelphia will not be able to get those guys unless they hand them a $30 million paycheck. So unless Philly's trying to give out that type of money, then go right ahead, but it doesn't solve all your problems. So they're more than likely going to have to bring back either Zach Cunningham, Nicholas Morrow, or Shaq Leonard, and then maybe sign one good linebacker, or just sign two just decent linebackers who are going to be upgrades from Zach Cunningham and Nicholas Morrow, which, like I said earlier, it's really not a hard thing to find guys to replace those guys with because they suck. I actually kind of like the idea of moving Kevin Byard to linebacker at one point because he's more of a better tackler than a guy like Shaq Leonard or Zach Cunningham is at this point in their career. And yes, I didn't forget about Nakobe Dean, who's on IR, but let's be honest, was Nakobe Dean all that great when he was playing? I mean, he's undersized, a decent athlete, and just a decent player, but we gotta be real here. Is he the real difference maker this defense needs? Not really. So they got big questions on this defense, and it doesn't help when your coaching staff isn't putting your defense in the proper position to make plays. So let's actually start looking at the offseason now. For starters, let's get a new head coach in this building, which I'll be honest with you guys, I don't know 100% they're actually going to fire Nick Sirianni because I'll be honest, I think it's a bad look if they do fire him. Should they fire him? I think so, but I do think it's a bad look because you're getting a guy who's now 3 years in, has been successful every single year, maybe up to the last final stretch of this season, who, by the way, went to a Super Bowl last year and was arguably one play away from winning the Super Bowl, and you're going to fire him after a small little skid of bad games. If I'm a guy like a Ben Johnson or a Bobby Slowick who's going to have a bunch of different opportunities out there, am I going to want to take this job? More than likely not, because why would I want to take a job here when I'm going to have plenty of different opportunities out there where I can be guaranteed maybe potentially more money and much more job stability? Whoever does end up taking the job from Nick Sirianni, if that does end up being the case, they're going to have pressure on them to never have a bad skid of football or else they might be out of a job within a year. So either A, Nick Sirianni does get fired, or B, they just stick with him and just get new OCs and DCs, which I could see that being a real case as well. But let's play the hypothetical game here and say he does get fired. Who would I like to see him get replaced by? I have 3 names. Number 1, Bobby Slowick, who I mentioned a little bit earlier. He has that San Francisco style, and I definitely do think he could be a lot more creative with this offense than Brian Johnson was. The guy turned CJ Stroud into an absolute unit, and I think going into next year with Jalen Hurts and some very good receivers, he could do even better things with those guys. The next name is Mike Vrabel, and I think basically every single team should be interested in this guy. This is a guy who can help fix your defensive problems because he's always had good defenses as a coach. And this is a guy who always wants to have the best offensive lines and just likes to run it down your throat. That is exactly what Philadelphia could use. If that's the case, I would love that hire for them. The next is Jim Harbaugh, who's going to bring in that hard-nosed Michigan style of offense that this team also needs. This is a guy who hardly ever used JJ McCarthy and just ran the ball like crazy with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards and those guys. Again, if you want to build an offense that is super easy for Jalen Hurts to operate within, I think that Jim Harbaugh could definitely implement that. Not to mention, he does have some very good connections with the defensive coordinator position. Hell, just look at Mike McDonald and what he's done there with Baltimore and Michigan over the past couple of seasons. And the last name I'll throw out there is Ben Johnson for basically the same reasons as I mentioned with the past two. This is a guy who likes to build first with the offensive line and likes to run the ball a shit ton, and I think that is exactly what this team should do. This is a team that should just basically fully rely on this offensive line and build everything they do off of what they are able to do. Which, when the offensive line is able to run the ball, that really opens up things like the play action, the RPOs, and even the down the field shot type of plays, which is really what makes this offense scary. Once they're in a flow, they're basically unstoppable. So those are the names of the guys who I think they should definitely target. Now, if we look at free agency, we also do have to mention the Devontae Smith extension, which if I was Philadelphia, I would make a priority. I don't know exactly how much money he will get. He's definitely not going to get a CeeDee Lamb or a Justin Jefferson-like contract, but I definitely do expect him to be very careful with how much he gets. I expect him to get a contract somewhere along the lines of what T. Higgins will be getting this offseason. You can make the argument that Devontae Smith is a better player than T. Higgins, so I do expect him not to take a team-friendly deal. So with whatever money they do have, I think the defense has to be the #1 priority. Some names I do like are Carlton Davis, Rasul Douglas, Micah Hyde, Levante David, Deontay Foreman, and if Marcus Mariota was to leave, then a guy like a Tyrod Taylor or Jacoby Brissett could definitely be in play as well. I fully expect Philadelphia to be pretty aggressive this offseason, and if that means going into a little bit of debt with the cap space, I wouldn't be shocked if they were to do so. And after this team is able to do a little bit of work with the contracts and open up a little bit of space, they're going to have more options out there to choose from. And if they do make those proper decisions, I think this defense can actually turn out to be pretty nice if they put all their investments this offseason into that unit. Now, when it comes to the draft, again, we're going back to the defense with their first round pick. It's going to be interesting to see what pick they end up having and who's going to be available with that pick. But a few names to keep an eye on here would be a guy like Cameron Kitchens, the safety from Miami, Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terran Arnold, the cornerbacks from Alabama, Cooper DeJean, the Iowa cornerback, who I don't think he'll be there, but if he is, that would be a home run hit for them. And the last name I'll throw out there is Kamari Lassiter, the Georgia cornerback. Of those names, obviously Cooper DeJean is probably my favorite because of his versatility, but again, I don't think he'll be there. So Eagles fans, just be prepared to hear one of those names taken with one of your picks. I could be wrong, but I would expect those guys to be at their top priority. But I think for Philadelphia, the number one thing that has to be addressed is the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. And I think whatever head coach does take over, if there is one that takes over, I think they'll get the best guys to fit the needs for this team. Whoever runs the offense has to learn from what Shane Steichen did and rely on the offensive line to open things up for the pass game. And defensively, I don't really have an answer for what scheme they should run, but whatever it is, do not run what they ran this most recent year. But Eagles fans, you guys tell me what you guys think about this team's future, and hopefully you guys enjoyed, but I love you guys. Peace.